In 1997, authors William Strauss and Neil Howe published a book called The Fourth Turning, the premise of which is based on a theory that history, particularly in America and Western societies, is cyclical and unfolds in predictable patterns. They refer to these patterns as turnings. Each turning lasts about 20 to 25 years, and together they make up a larger cycle of approximately 80 to 100 years. Strauss and Howe refer to this as a saeculum. The four turnings are broken down into specific periods. First is the high, a period of strong institutions and weak individualism. Society is cohesive and confident in collective progress. A historical example of the high would be the post-World War II baby boom and economic prosperity. The second turning is the awakening, a time when institutions are attacked in the name of personal and spiritual autonomy. People seek to rediscover individual and spiritual freedoms. Some examples include the civil rights movement, the sexual revolution, the second wave feminist movements, and the anti-war protests. The third turning is the unraveling, when institutions are weak and distrusted, while individualism is strong and flourishing. Society becomes fragmented and broken into sections, and people's values decline. An example of this is the growing hard-lined ideological divide between conservative and progressive ideologies. Sides fighting over LGBTQ rights, women's reproductive rights, the role of religion in public life and education, the fight against censorship in art and media, and more attention being brought to issues of race, ethnicity, and gender. The fourth and final turning is the crisis. During this period, there is a destruction and rebirth of society and institutions. Major events force society to confront and resolve its deepest problems. This is a time of war, revolution, or other significant upheaval. The most recent example of this time is the Great Depression and World War II. The end of one cycle and the beginning of another is marked by the crisis turning. Generational changes drive these cycles, as each generation reacts to the events and conditions of their upbringing, thus shaping society differently each time. The most recent high period was post-World War II, during the baby boom and economic prosperity era. A picture of the 1950s housewife comes to mind. Leave It to Beaver, big houses with white picket fences, stay-at-home moms, low crime, and general financial freedom. This was 79 years ago from 2024. In 2025, it will make 80 years, which means we are currently in the crisis stage, the fourth turning. To put this into perspective, other crisis turnings include the Great Depression and World War II from 1929 to 1946, the American Civil War from 1860 to 1865, and the American Revolutionary War from 1773 to 1794. We are in the crisis. Pandemics, extreme wealth inequality, rising crime rates, geopolitical tension throughout the world, cyber and biological warfare. Artificial intelligence is relieving people of jobs that humans don't need to do. However, the people who lose these jobs are not being protected by those in charge. Women's reproductive rights being taken away, growing distrust in the media and especially the government. People are poor, hungry, stressed, and in debt. Mental and physical illnesses are on the rise. Social movements trying to address racial injustice, climate change, and the economic inequality problem are being stifled. People are getting very tired and weary of the archaic systems hanging on for dear life in an ever-progressing world. You can feel the tension, can't you? Something is going to happen. And I'm not talking about what happened on July 13th. There's more to come. Leave the World Behind, written and directed by Sam Esmail, and Civil War, written and directed by Alex Garland, are two films about the United States on the brink of collapse. Premiered in 2023 and 2024 respectively, these movies display clear signs of the times. They have both epitomized the crisis period of the fourth turning that we're currently living in. The two movies do not exist in the same universe, but they honestly could have. Civil War could have easily taken place 2 to 3 years after Leave the World Behind. Leave the World Behind, originally a novel by author Rumaan Alam, Mom tells the story of white middle-aged parents Amanda and Clay who decide to leave the city with their 2 children for a mini vacation on Long Island in a remote luxury home. The family enjoys their little escape by cooking, swimming in the pool, going to the beach. All seems to be going well when their getaway is disrupted by a middle-aged black man, G.H., and his daughter Ruth, who are actually the homeowners. They inform Amanda and Clay that a blackout has swept through the city and has forced them to seek refuge in their country home. Initially wary and slow to believe that G.H. and Ruth actually own the home, the tension is strongly felt, particularly from Amanda. She becomes very suspicious of the duo and very irritable and rude. Shortly after, the blackout extends to the vacation home, leaving them only to rely on a generator. Many odd and unsettling events occur throughout the film, and we see what perhaps is a very realistic view of everyday life in the face of a catastrophic and apocalyptic event taking place on American soil. The film explores the dynamics of distrust in the middle of and within the 2 families, which is exacerbated by the racial and social differences between them. The crisis forces them to confront their prejudices and find common ground. Leave the World Behind depicts the current generation war we are facing in not only America but the world. The concept of the changing of the guard is a time when a new person or group starts to be in control of a society or organization, resulting in a lot of changes. Right now, we're going through a changing of the guard, and the old guard is not letting go without a fight, no matter who they take down with them. Civil War by Alex Garland strongly depicts this, but we will get to that a bit later. Now let me break down these character profiles from Leave the World Behind, because what Sam Esmail wrote is nothing short of genius. Amanda, Clay, and GH all represent different aspects of Gen X. Gen Xers are people born in the mid-1960s up to 1980. The oldest Gen Xer would be 59 in 2024. And the youngest would be 43, which means that many people from Generation X are still fighting with baby boomers for a seat at the table. Amanda represents the disillusioned and pessimistic Gen Xer. In the beginning of the film, she gives a cold and nihilistic monologue about how much she truly hates people and society, saying to her husband as she stands by the window, "I saw all these people starting their day with such tenacity, such verve, all in an effort to make something of themselves, make something of our world. I felt so lucky to be a part of that. But then I remembered what the world is actually like, and I came to a more accurate realization. I fucking hate people." She's a New Yorker. And as a fellow New Yorker, I know that the rough and tumble dog-eat-dog nature of the concrete jungle leads many people to live with an ever-present chip on their shoulder. Amanda is your typical, it's wine o'clock Gen Xer, as throughout the film she is often depicted pouring wine, drinking wine, finishing wine, or some other kind of alcohol. Lots of drinking to numb and distract herself, done by so many to cope with the fucked up world we're living in. Being from NYC, you would think that Amanda would be an open-minded, bleeding heart liberal and anti-racist, but like many white coastal elites, including upper echelon New Yorkers, there's actually a lot of dormant racist beliefs. So much so, Amanda even suggests that GH, the homeowner of their Airbnb, might sneak into her 13-year-old daughter's bedroom at night. From the beginning, she thinks she's better than GH and Ruth and can't for the life of her believe that he is actually the homeowner and wealthier than she is. When Amanda tries to one-up GH by letting him know that she lives in Park Slope, a neighborhood that once upon a time was a red line between classes and whites and blacks in Brooklyn, GH tells her that he's heard how affordable that side of town has become. A slight for Amanda's ego, indeed. When Amanda lets her guard down later in the film, she finds herself drawn to and attracted to GH, who also returns her interest. They begin dancing to a popular 90s song that Amanda loves called Too Close. The song is about a guy getting an erection when his dance partner in the club keeps dancing too close to him. And as we all know, nothing in movies is done by accident. This particular scene did not happen in the book. And I believe it speaks to an element of an attraction and fear that exists between black people and white people in America, but it's still often treated as a line that shouldn't be crossed on both sides. Because during this exact scene outside by the pool, Ruth and Clay are talking about his career and his life, and later on, Ruth informs her father that she believes that Clay was giving vibes that he wanted to have sex with her. Not to mention, Clay's son takes photos on his phone of Ruth in her bikini that he masturbates with later that night. Clay, played by Ethan Hawke, represents the optimistic, just be cool man, Gen Xer. He's a city boy, which is depicted as generally useless in a dire situation such as the apocalypse. Clay is a college professor, a peacekeeper, much more relaxed and optimistic than his wife Amanda. He even wears a t-shirt throughout the film from a 90s feminist punk rock group. When encountering the Spanish-speaking woman on the road who desperately needed his help, the hippie, people-loving man in Clay melted and ran away, leaving her to a fate of God knows what. It's important to note, though Clay didn't have the hard skills to protect his family, he did have soft skills, as he was able to talk Kevin Bacon's character Danny into empathizing with him and giving him medicine for his son. He did this by submitting to Danny's alpha status at the moment. This shows that in an apocalyptic type of event, it's all hands on deck, and everyone has something to offer. As much as this might seem like a bitch move, it was actually quite manipulative and cunning. The people who run the world aren't gun-toting, house-building, brute strength men like Danny, but rather well-read, charming, strategic men like Clay, who will play the beta role if it means getting what they need and want. This is some 48 Laws of Power level shit. Did I mention that this film was produced by Barack and Michelle Obama, and that Sam Esmail and Obama shared the script back and forth, with Obama making notes and suggestions? Does he know something that we don't know? Is this a warning of some kind by the former president?
Not really. Maybe. It's classified.
When showing up to his own home, GH apologizes twice to Amanda and Clay. He even lets them know that he stood at the glass window so they could see him first and not get startled. GH represents the respectable Gen X black man trope. The black man that doesn't rock boats, does everything he's supposed to do, goes to school for a respectable, high-earning profession, dresses in a proper way, doesn't get angry, speaks in a sensitive manner, and is submissive to white people when necessary. Perhaps even marrying and procreating with a white woman, not for love, but for an elevation of his social standing. To his millennial daughter Ruth's dismay, GH apologizes repeatedly for coming back to his own damn house. And to make things worse, GH and Ruth are then forced to sleep in the basement, even though they own the place.
Ruth even says, going down the stairs, "I can't believe we have to sleep in the basement. What do we get to do tomorrow? Their laundry?"
This is a very obvious and blatant allegory for the Atlantic slave trade and following Reconstruction era America and civil rights movement. I know. Just let me cook for a second. Let's take things back a little bit. Earlier in the movie, Amanda's family was at the beach enjoying the sun and waves, when suddenly a massive tanker ran aground on the sand. This film has so many omens and Easter eggs, it's like so hard to keep count, but the name of the ship that ran aground was White Lion. In the year 1619, the White Lion was the first ship responsible for bringing enslaved Africans to the colony of Virginia. This ship's journey is credited as the start of slavery in America, which is one of the most depraved crimes that has ever happened in this country. In my opinion, it continues to happen. It's just changed its form. This ship is crashing on the beach to tell everyone, hello, don't ignore this. This is still affecting you today. This is your foundation. This is the start of it all. America was started with violent theft of land from the native people, followed by slavery and not paying people for their labor. And here we are in 2024, where people are paid unfairly for their labor and not entitled to any land. This house is GH's house. much like how America is the home of every African descending from American chattel slavery. GH built this house the same way Africans built America. And even in his own house, he has to sleep in the fucking basement? The same way African descendants of slavery are treated like second-class citizens, even when they sacrificed everything. Even though GH busted his ass for everything that he has, he still ended up in the basement. And it was interesting that GH, due to his job, had insider information to what was really going on in the country, much like how a lot of black people online will predict a lot of things coming from a mile away. I believe that there is something about not being at the top that just makes you see things for how they really are. Ruth, the disillusioned millennial, who has a lot in common with the disillusioned Gen X, she's just taking things in stride, but she also won't stand for the racial disrespect from Amanda. She gives, "I am not my ancestors, I will fuck you up." She's open about still figuring herself out and is very self-aware. She calls things like it is, like referring to the show Friends as a show being nostalgic for a time that never existed. Her pessimism and Amanda's is so similar, and that's why they clash. Ruth has very millennial-coded tattoos of simple designs and also hairy armpits. She said something interesting in the film while in the bed with her dad. Even mom would agree to not trust white people. The even mom part makes me think that her mother was white, even though she's not shown in the film. The argument Ruth has with Amanda in the barn sounds like a mother and daughter. Now, Amanda's kids, Archie and Rose, represent Generation Z and Generation Alpha, respectively. Now, as someone who is very active on TikTok, I try to stay plugged in so that I can fully understand the culture. I'm very cultured, in case you haven't noticed. Archie is the very pessimistic, nihilistic, cruel, numb, and porn-obsessed Gen Z male. He's mean to his sister, and honestly, overall seems like he's given up. A lot of Gen Z feel like, what is the point of even trying when you live in a world that is constantly holding you back? I can't even blame them. Archie is so nasty to his sister, much like the rising misogyny with that generation. He calls her a dumbass, stupid, and does things that can get her hurt. He's not her protector, and he's very incel-coded, including wearing rockstar gaming clothes. When Archie loses his teeth, it reminds me of tooth loss dreams that I've had in the past. Teeth falling out in a dream represents great loss and things changing. Maybe Archie dies not long after this film is over. Rose, Generation Alpha. They're coming up like a train and we're not even paying attention. She has a melancholy feel to her, and she distracts herself with binging content like the Friends TV show. She wears a NASA shirt, like her head is in the clouds or space. She seems somewhat disassociated from everything that's going on. However, it's still entering her subconscious. Generation Alpha is going to end up cleaning up the mess that has been made and dumped on millennials. Through the film, Rose is disassociated, but she is also extremely curious and tired of waiting. She doesn't want to sit around and do nothing, waiting for things to happen. And this is what leads her to disappearing at the end of the film. Rose tried to alert everyone that something is wrong, but they kept ignoring her because she's young. Anyone under the age of 40? Does that sound familiar to you? At one point, Rose even says, "No one cares what I say." And her brother Archie responds, "That's probably true." As Gen Z, he's given up. Why bother with this fucked up world? But this just makes Rose more curious. Rose is one of the few people who starts to notice that the animals are acting strangely.
And she's also the first person to notice that the White Lion tanker is headed straight for the beach.
As Rose's distractions are being withheld from her, she becomes exceedingly anxious, and she ends up becoming the most powerful person in the film.
It is she who refuses to sit around and wait for people to tell her what to do. When she ventures off through the neighborhood, she finds the house with the doomsday bunker in the basement, complete with food and supplies. Another important character in the film is the noise, a loud, ear-piercing dog whistle-like scream that brings all the characters to their knees. This same noise made Archie's teeth fall out of his mouth when he woke up in the morning after a night of a fever. Why is the noise depicted in the film so scary? It's because it's based on an actual weapon that exists in real life that causes what has been coined Havana syndrome. The first incidents were reported in Cuba when American and Canadian diplomats and spies were experiencing unusual and unexplained health issues. The victims heard extremely loud and excruciating noises that lasted between 20 seconds to 30 minutes. Descriptions of the sound include grinding metal, piercing squeals, and buzzing. Symptoms of Havana syndrome include visual and audio disturbances, pressure and vibration in the head, ear pain, cognitive and balance problems. Some people felt intense skull pressure. Some felt heat. Another pulsing pain. Covering their ears made no difference at all. One victim described it as a dentist drilling on steroids right inside her ear, too close to her eardrum, then times it by 10. She ultimately passed out and struggled with memory and concentration after the ordeal. U.S. intelligence agencies reported that they believe that the weapon is directed energy or microwaves fired from hidden devices. U.S. officials have blamed Russia for the development of this weapon, but of course the Russian government has denied any involvement. In the film, as the characters get wrapped up into their meaningless squabbles in their new little community, here comes the noise, slapping them back into reality.
This film has such a stomach-turning and anxiety-inducing climax, with Danny threatening to kill GH and Clay over medication for Archie. Danny very clearly represents the doomsday prepper personality, the ex-military, the guy who says he saw this coming from a mile away. The interaction between these three men shows us the downfall of this American society. We don't want to see each other as brothers and sisters, and we withhold information from each other, even to our own detriment. Amanda's family is so lucky they were in Long Island when all of this went down. This was one of my biggest fears with living in NYC in the modern era. It is hanging on by a thread. Anything that happens, the entire city will fall. The film cinematography further gives you this twisted, upside down, off-kilter, disjointed, and sickening feeling. The camera doesn't let us rest. In the fourth turning book, Strauss and Howe identify 4 generational archetypes that correspond to the turnings. Number 1, the prophets, born during a high, coming of age during an awakening, lead society during the crisis. Currently, these are the baby boomers, born during the highs of post-World War II and the economic prosperity of the 1950s, and leading the world into the awakening of the 1960s and 70s. Number 2, the nomads, born during an awakening, coming of age during an unraveling, lead during a high. Currently, this is Gen X, born in the 60s and 70s, reaching adolescence in the surging excess of the 80s, and leading during the prosperous late 90s, such as the dot-com bubble. Number 3, the heroes, born during an unraveling, coming of age during a crisis, led during an awakening. That's the millennials, can't you tell? Currently, these are millennials. Older millennials born during the excessive 80s and unraveling, such as the Berlin Wall coming down, and leading during our current changing of the guard. Number 4, the artists, born during a crisis, coming of age during a high, leading during an unraveling. Currently, this is Generation Z and A, born during the economic recession that began with 9/11 and the Bush administration, followed by a high we have yet to reach in 2024. Honestly, I love Leave the World Behind so much because it is one of the scariest films I've seen in a long time. This is truly a horror film because this can actually happen in real life. In the end of Leave the World Behind, GH asks Clay seriously if they are going to have each other's back during whatever is about to unfold. He tells him about the 3 stages to destabilizing a country from within. First, isolate the people. Disable their communication and transportation, making your target as deaf and dumb as possible. Second, terrorize them with covert attacks and misinformation, overwhelming their defense capabilities. Without a clear enemy or motive, people will start turning against each other. The third and final stage is the coup d'etat, civil war. collapse. Civil War, written and directed by Alex Garland, is a dystopian thriller set in a near-future America fragmented by internal conflict. The film explores the societal impacts of a second American Civil War fought between a tyrannical federal government and secessionist factions. Through the lens of war journalists and photographers traveling from New York City to Washington, D.C., we get an ugly glimpse of what war on an American soil would look like. This movie is particularly creepy in the way that it parallels certain people you see if you're chronically online like I am. An uncomfortable fact that most people don't want to admit is that internet confessions are often representative of real-life beliefs. That being said, there are a lot of crazy and hateful people out there. You have the tyrannical dictator president who has betrayed America, calling for American citizens to be killed. Worse so, the president even calls for journalists to be killed on sight. I'll be the first to say that I don't trust the mainstream media and can provide a slew of examples why, but anyone like this president calling for journalists to be harmed is an extremely dangerous person to democracy. Does this sound familiar? This is happening in America right now, with political leaders sowing confusion and distrust in the media. I would be remiss to say that the media didn't do things that are untrustworthy, but as Alex Garland said in an interview about the movie he wrote, we need journalists as much as we need doctors in a society. They're extremely important, and harming a journalist in any way is a war crime of the highest order. The 4 journalists in the movie represent various viewpoints. Sammy, the boomer, and the oldest in the crew is a mentor, and he represents the old school style of journalism. It's his goal to get to the president and interview him before everything goes to hell. Lee Smith, played by Kirsten Dunst, is a famous war photojournalist who is experiencing combat fatigue. She's weary and tired of a lifetime career of death. Never would she have imagined photographing a war in her own country. And then there's Joel, a colleague of Lee and Sammy, who is still excited about the work that he does. Finally, Jessie, the young 20-something photojournalist who is just starting her career. I have a full breakdown of the film Civil War in another video, so you should check that out after this one. The cause of the Civil War in the movie is left largely vague by Alex Garland, which was absolutely intentional because that wasn't the point. According to him, what is more important here is that whatever the president and government has done, it was so egregious and so treasonous that states like Texas and California, who couldn't be more different in their belief systems, had to come together to take it down.
During the film's rising climax, when Jessie and Bohai are kidnapped, Sammy warns them of certain death should they intervene. Lee and Joel decide to anyway. It ends with Sammy losing his life, which he gave for the younger and able journalists to continue on. Let me be clear. Everything old isn't bad. The film's entire storytelling device is through the lens of an older style of journalism, in which journalists intentionally and deliberately worked very hard to be objective. This new modern style of journalism, which is swayed by corporate shareholders, a thirst for website clicks and rage baiting, and the desire to be first over accurate, further draws this divide among people, contributing greatly to an already fracturing society.
In the movie, citizens are executing one another, psychopaths and people slighted by their neighbors or high school classmates even are taking advantage of the situation. The American dollar has become absolutely worthless. Parts of the country are total war zones, while others are pretending that nothing is happening at all.
Civil War shows what can happen in a country when contested leadership refuses to step aside. The president in this film was willing to kill every last citizen if it meant staying in power. He was not willing to change the guard or pass the baton. He believed that he knew what was best for everyone, no matter how many people have warned him to step down. The US dollar became worthless. People had no food, shelter, and no future. The narcissism it takes to lead your own country into darkness for power and ego knows no bounds. As the president's final minutes alive wind down, his cabinet and the Secret Service continue to try and save his life. Understandably, that is their job, but is duty to your job more important than the lives of millions and the future of a nation? We see this in real life just like in Civil War, where corporate overlords and government officials refuse to back down to the will of the people. It doesn't matter if people have no food, nowhere to to live and cannot afford health services. It doesn't matter if you spend every waking moment working and worrying. Civil War is headed for a part 2, and I bet that the sequel will be a prequel. I look forward to learning of the premise of the film, which will explain the reasons that the Civil War started in the first place. I have my bets that pervasive and rampant inequality, as well as trying to revert back to a more restrictive and conservative past, will play a large part.
This movie is a scary depiction of the fourth turning, the crisis, at its most extreme outcome. Something is happening right now. Something is in the air. And as we've seen on July 13th, the heat is starting to turn up very quickly. The same extreme polarization that caused the events to happen in the movie Civil War and Leave the World Behind are happening right now in this American life. Unfortunately, it seems like this crisis turning doesn't only exist in America. Geopolitical tensions are rising all over the world in places like Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. The people rising up and fighting back against their government's unscrupulous practices in France and Kenya. Chinese youth are lying flat, unwilling to participate in a system that doesn't value their hard work. South Korean women are giving 4 no's with their 4B movement. No to marriage, no to children, no to dating, and no to sex, in an effort to fight back against institutionalized sexism in the country. Recently, the House of Representatives passed a bill that automatically registers young men between the ages of 18 to 26 for the draft. This would require young men to serve in the military under the threat of criminal penalties. Young people don't want war. They don't want to fight for things they don't believe in and don't understand. This is once again a showdown between the old guard and the new, who refuse to step into a modern era where people don't have to die for a disagreement. It's a scary time for sure, because you know something is going to happen, but you don't know what it is. America has an election coming up, and there are folks on both sides of the aisle, perhaps one more than the other, calling for a civil war if the election doesn't go their way. That would be a terrible thing to happen for sure, but it seems like the old guard will not let go without a fight. With the crisis rolling on, the prospect of revolution and national violence increases. As business leaders and the government kick the equality can down the road, people are getting angrier and angrier. There are people who are fighting against progress and freedom in this country, and things need to change. They want to suppress undesirable groups of people, and they treat people's real lives like it's some kind of sick game. It's like one giant Squid Game to them, if you will. The silver lining to all of this is what happens after the crisis period, the high period. Institutions become strong again, community is strong, and individualism is weak. There is a collective confidence in society, and the focus is on planning and building, doing big things. Civic authority is restored. Cultural expression shifts to emphasize community, and individuals start seeing themselves as a part of a larger whole. Also, big technological advances usually happen during this period. Hello, AGI. I don't know what's going to happen next, so I can't end this video on a high note. And just like the characters in Leave the World Behind, the best you can do is stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please leave a comment telling me what you thought about The Fourth Turning, or Leave the World Behind, or Civil War. Please share this with your movie-loving friends, and I will catch up with you guys in the next one. Peace.